As if they don't have too much on their plates. The Kings of Combat Sports Podcast.
Neal.
Wait, they'll talk about the things they did that day. They'll analyze the work of Triple H. Rewind to SmackDown. 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 Rewind to SmackDown.
And hello and welcome everybody to this week's edition of Rewind to SmackDown. This is a bonus and free XL edition for everybody out there. This is a, kind of a last minute, I want to say very last minute decision that I personally made just before we went on air, because, we typically have these longer editions of the show where Neal and I talk about the news stories of the day prior to talking about the SmackDown review itself, which is what most of our audience will be able to hear on the free side of things. But this is, of course, a very big, important news day that I don't really, feel the need to or want to put behind a paywall. Of course, we were talking about some very unfortunate news, starting things off, Neal, here with WWE's latest rounds of talent cuts. Care to take things away?
That's right. Well, yeah. I mean, if any of our listeners have been on social media this evening, or in group chats, or on their Discords and all the rest, they will have heard about this. WWE has engaged in probably the biggest round of post-Mania cuts in years. I don't remember the last time it was of this scale. We're up into 20 plus talents gone across the main roster, NXT, and the developmental system. A couple of caveats. We don't know how many of these talents, have been their contracts may have lapsed and not been renewed, or are cuts in the sense of being released from their contracts. But given that they're all coming on the one day, I think we can probably safely assume a lot of them are releases. We have to tip our hats to reporting from Biteful and from PW Insider. There's also quite a few talents have taken to social media themselves to acknowledge that they've gone. I think the headline is probably, if you could sum it up into like one big group, it's the Wyatt Six. They're done. All 5 members are out. Bo Dallas, Nikki Cross, Joe Gacy, Dexter Lumis, Eric Rowan. The faction that debuted in June 2024 as a kind of tribute to the Bray Wyatt character in really a fine style of entrance. As we remembered, the found footage of the videos and kind of the build up to all of this was great. But as Way and I have discussed for several weeks on SmackDown, perhaps this group has run out of creative steam, but still to get rid of all of them in one go, it's a lot. It's gone way beyond the Wyatts. Among the bigger names are Kairi Sane. I found this one quite surprising. I mean, she was right in the middle of a pretty lengthy storyline, particularly with Asuka and this sort of being dominated by Asuka as the Senpai storyline. Also tied in with Io and Rhea. Her last match was on the April 20th Raw, teaming with Asuka against Rhea and Sky. This one feels strange to me.
Yeah.
Aleister
Before we maybe talk a little bit about every single person, I think we should go through just the entire list, just off the bat, and
Sure.
maybe we shall read it as of our post wrestling post here. So this is in alphabetical order, but we start things off with Alba Fire, and of course this is only updated as of 11:19 p.m. Eastern time, so this could change by the time many of you may be listening to this. But as of now, Alba Fire, Aleister Black, Alex Shelley, Andre Chase, Apollo Crews, Bo Dallas, Chris Island, Chris Sabin, Dante Chen, Dexter Lumis, Eric Rowan, Joe Gacy, Kairi Sane, Luca Crucifino, Malik Blade, Nikki Cross, Santos Escobar, Serena Linton, Trill London, Tyra May Steele, Tariq Igwe, Tyson DuPont, Zelina Vega, and Zoe Stark are the names reported so far to have been to be departing the WWE. Maybe we should touch on some maybe one of the more attention grabbing ones of the list is the entire Wyatt Six, as you alluded to, Neal. I feel they had a great spark with these initial vignettes. Some of the I think best parts of the Bray Wyatt character I thought were very well exemplified in these sort of teasers. Everything they did, that opening scene on Raw, which maybe might have been divisive, but I would say largely, met with positivity. But for me, I feel like the turning point was once they moved to SmackDown. They were reduced suddenly to like just being this very generic, spooky villain group with very little depth to them, and of course engaging in an endless feud, seemingly with the the MFTs over this lantern. Certainly cooled them off. Like they became, I think, a lot more less intimidating, less novel, and at some point, just a tag team that was honestly quite average. They won the tag team championships. It was not a run that I thought offered much notable. In fact, I think it kind of cooled down the division a little bit, which I wouldn't entirely place on them, but they weren't delivering the quality of matches that I think the division was known for prior. But would you say overall there was more potential, or that this group ran its course?
It's weird because we were talking about this last week, Way, and my sense was that this gimmick had run out of steam, that it had played out. Even the entrance wasn't really getting the sort of pop that it used to get from people in attendance. And it's one of those ones, if you're in the arena, you feel, a kind of a wow factor from. I just think they were retreading the same thing the whole time. I agree with you that the titles did nothing for the group. In fact, when it comes to the in-ring, it almost takes away some of the mystique of these characters. I can well understand how even some of the brightest sparks in the creative team might have been throwing their hands up and saying, we just don't know what to do with these folks anymore. And I'm sure they were being pitched stuff from the talent themselves. And it all goes to a larger point for me, which is that perhaps instead of repackaging wrestlers, which is what we used to see happen quite a bit, is there's now this endless pipeline through LFG to evolve to NXT to the main roster. And I feel like behind all of this, and it's a larger point maybe, is instead of taking an existing talent and trying to give them something new in terms of a creative direction, they can just call up someone else, and it's cheaper as well, probably, instead of a long tenured talent.
Some reaction here publicly here. Nikki Cross does say, goodbye and thank you, WWE. This is from X. I'm really excited for whatever my next chapter will hold. Thank you all for the continued love and support. Special thank you to Robbie Brookside and William Regal for helping this dream come true. Thank you to the wrestlers, coaches, producers, and all the backstage crew who make all this possible. To the amazing girls in the locker room, heart emoji. Joe Gacy simply throws up a peace sign emoji saying LOL. And we also have Dexter Loomis showing a still of him, displaying a hatchet during some might consider the peak of his run, which was his wedding in NXT, of course, to Indy Hartwell. I mean, I wonder if those two might reunite somewhere. That opens the door, certainly. Yeah. Kairi Sane, you were saying before I cut you off, Neal, your thoughts?
I'm surprised by this one. I just wonder, did Kairi want to leave? It's this one's fairly baffling to me because of, as I was mentioning earlier on, as I alluded to, the length of the storyline between her, particularly between her and Asuka. This really felt like there was a destination of the two of them in a program, and it goes back for months at this point. She was active in the ring as recently as a couple of weeks ago on Raw. No, as recently as this Monday on Raw, in fact, in that tag match. So she's not injured, or I don't think she is. It's this one to me is one of the more perplexing. Not someone you would have thought would be on the chopping block. Not someone you thought was creatively bereft. I thought the Kabuki Warriors were great together. Interested in your thoughts, Way?
Completely. Like, she would have been one of those names that I actually felt, you could have certainly justified a spot on WrestleMania, and I would think anybody who'd, be an announcer at a WrestleMania level show would probably be safe from this sort of thing. Again, you bring up a great point. We don't exactly know the reason why she might be leaving. She voluntarily left the first time. Is probably to be closer to home. We don't know if that's the case this time, but it is rather unfortunate we never got finality for this particular story between her and Asuka that has been, continuing as recently as this past Monday. So felt very sudden. This run when she came back since 2023, joining Damage Control, I can't really say I was too impressed by to start. I certainly feel like, there was a lot more sloppiness in her in-ring work, at least to start. But somewhere along the way, she certainly found her groove back and suddenly just developed this incredible story and incredible relationship with Asuka and doing the senpai kohai thing that I, again, am sort of sad that we never really got a full conclusion for. Because in the end of all that, there was at one point, Neal, where I felt Kairi would have emerged out of all of this as the biggest babyface. Certainly the most sympathetic coming off of this Asuka thing. And whether it be to team with Io or to oppose Io or to oppose Asuka, I think you could have ended up with Kairi Sane at a much higher level on the card than she unfortunately ended up in.
Agreed, and I feel like that was clearly the plan as well, creatively. So this one is perplexing. We just don't know what's behind it. Aleister Black's another fairly notable one way because he's been released for the second time now. I mean, he's only been back for about a year. Never really found second gear after that initial run with Damian Priest. His last match was in the Andre Battle Royal last week. With him, we have to say goodbye to Zelina as well, his wife. She's been working more recently as his on-screen manager, but has been Queen of the Ring, has been in the LWO, has been women's US champion. So, what's next for Tommy End? I wonder at this point. Would
well, I'll tell you
what
what was up next immediately for Zelina Vega, and that was going on her Twitch stream, which I imagine she probably still does regularly, but she happened to go on pretty much right as this news broke. So I caught a little bit of it because, of course, I did have to cover SmackDown tonight, but. Sure. What like she was talking quite freely, it seemed, and what I did catch was of her talking about how of her Black, the Wyatt Six, that WWE didn't really know what to do with supernatural type characters. So she seemingly showing some frustration about maybe the way their characters were handled. This is one that, I mean, for months, Neal, like they've been building. They essentially put Aleister Black and Zelina in the same role that Karrion Kross and Scarlett were playing, as the devil on various babyfaces' shoulders, urging them to turn heel, basically. And they were not like, they were much more protective of Aleister Black, at least in ring. They gave him wins recently over Randy Orton and Sami Zayn, two very high-ranking guys. Now, it's one of those where, like, despite winning, he was not really the focus of the story, but still, getting win over, like, people that high up on the card, you would think that they would have something to follow up with this guy. But they clearly didn't, or at least didn't enough to want to see it through. So we should also mention Zelina was none too pleased that Sean Ross Sapp was the first to maybe get the news out there rather than allowing her to do it herself. So that brings up a debate about maybe like etiquette in announcing this sort of thing. I mean, in Sean Ross Sapp's defense, it's news, and at what point do you how long do you wait until before making news public? So it's nonetheless an online debate that maybe is a talking point coming out of all of this. But any other thoughts on
As I said from the top, I mean, we used to get the announcements from WWE itself on its website about the future, wish X well in their future endeavors. We haven't had that in years, so we're reliant on reporting, and not every talent will want to announce it themselves. So there is that. Also, I do wonder what's next for Aleister Black. A return to AEW.
The big question is AEW. I mean, he was cool as hell in AEW in presentation, but I suppose like a reputation is out there about how much exactly he was willing to do in AEW.
That's right.
As a talent, I think he's totally undeniable. I would say the same about Zelina in her role specifically as a manager and what she's able to offer. That I think both of them, simply as talents, would be great fits for AEW. But I suppose there are concerns that are maybe not just about how good somebody is in ring, but how willing they are to accept perhaps booking decisions. Again, these are just like sort of rumor and innuendo. People look at Andrade like having a very different run this time around than maybe the first time.
Yeah,
I wonder if the door will be open for the both of them.
Interesting well, it's one to follow. We'll see. I mean, we do know he wanted to leave. That much is clear, because he did.
Partially because of his wife, but now his wife is free to go with him. Right?
True. Yeah. Who else have we got? The Motor City Machine Guns, both Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin. Two guys who spent decades, winning championships everywhere else. Finally made it to WWE. Very hot debut in October of 2024, winning the tag titles in their second week. And now, roughly 18 months later, they're gone. And we haven't seen them on TV a great deal. You and I have been reviewing SmackDown a lot, and if we see them, it's generally hanging around backstage with some of the other tag team
They're
divisions.
still learning how to sign up for ESPN Plus, I think.
That seems to be their role. Yeah.
This
initial momentum was never to return for a team that are tremendous in ring, and I think we're one of the standouts pretty much in the run up to WrestleMania this time last year, where the tag team division on SmackDown was kind of dominated by the workhorses, including these guys.
The 3 hour era, like the first time around,
First time, yeah.
The idea seemed to really be, hey, we got 3 hours of show. Let's extend some of these matches and maybe like offer really, really good wrestling in our tag team division, and maybe that's part of the reason why the Machine Guns were brought in. I mean, this was one of the more feel-good signings of the past year. I think everybody in the wrestling world was happy for them to finally get this sort of spotlight. And they had some great matches as part of like that tag division. But when the 3 hour era ended, I would say so too did their sort of relevance, on this show. They, along with most of that division, just became these background extras. And they were also building up some sort of story in the time that they had some tensions between the two of them that over Johnny Gargano that, again, did not see it play itself out. And where do you see these two ending up?
I could see these two in AEW quite easily. Yeah. I think they'd be a great fit for that company because work rate is their thing. I think it is almost amusing in a dark way to think that the moment they get a storyline, which they've never really had, which is this sort of tension being brewing between the two of them over the past couple of weeks, somebody just decides, nah, we can't be asked with this,
Yeah.
We'll give them
Well, honestly, it's one of those where like I wonder if even the writing staff is made aware of these sort of things, or if it's just a direction from higher up that says, hey, like, what's expendable? Who is expendable? Because we have so many other talents to come in. As we talk about all of these and whether or not the AEW might be a place for them, I mean, we have to continue to remind ourselves there's not that much space in AEW, although Tony Khan and his sort of signing habits would maybe make you think that there's always room.
AEW roster bloat is a real thing, and we know they've got 4 hours of TV each week, but they've got major programs to build for every pay-per-view, and so we do get the biggest names, and a lot of people are on the sidelines. So yeah, they've got an extremely deep bench already. Some of these people may well end up there, and honestly, I could see the Machine Guns because they've got a thriving tag team division. I could see the Machine Guns as someone Tony would want.
A return to TNA, I think, is also very possible too. We got Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling, who Scott D'Amore obviously having a relationship with these two. So, yes, certainly, I would say like I think they'd be very like valuable free agents on the market. I do want to talk about maybe like a group of talents, perhaps in one here, like in Santos Escobar, Zoe Stark. We can throw in as well Tyson here of Tyson and Tyreek, who all three of these talents are in some way either currently injured or just coming back from injury in the case of Zoe Stark. So Zoe Stark, we all saw her get injured. I believe it was like a springboard dropkick that looked awful. Just cleared from injury and released upon injury. Santos Escobar had a tricep surgery in March. Said he was going for another surgery in April. And this one, I think, maybe especially notable due to some drama regarding his status back in October, where WWE reportedly, really actively wanted him to come back. So he did come back, put him into AAA. Then he got injured, and now he happens to be released. Also, Tyson announced this month that he was in for a hip surgery that was long overdue. He announced this. So he took some time out to address the issue. And now he and his partner don't seem to have jobs. So even though this may not be what WWE will say occurred, they will probably just suggest, hey, timing, whatever. The message that is directly being sent to your roster is that if you get hurt, you are of no more use to us. And if you don't get over, you are no use to us. So you better get over, which means for many of these people, wrestling harder, but don't wrestle so hard enough to the point where you get hurt.
Yeah. We saw this already with Rich Holland and kind of the saga of Luke Menzies stories coming out week after week, and him being fairly blunt about it all, and then sort of trying to take it back and all the rest of it. And out of the group that you're talking about, I feel probably the most for Zoe Stark. I mean, she had a terrible injury and then just had another one. She's had a year of rehab. I think there was reporting that she very, very recently, after that year, has been cleared. So she was healthy again, and now she's gone. So I feel very badly for her, but also anyone who is currently injured. I'd very much at least like to think that WWE will cover their medical expenses for injuries that they incurred while they were under contract. So we hope, of course, that Tyson, Tyreek, who else is injured?
Escobar.
Santos, of course, yeah.
It's
And he's an interesting case because, like you said, he was leaving, and then they wanted him back, and I felt at the time that was really to try and bolster AAA and get a big name on there, but they seem content with just Berto and Angel from that original stable.
There's incredible talent here, really amongst like anybody on this list. I mean, if you are talented enough to be signed by WWE, you probably have something to offer. But like, especially in the case of Santos Escobar, I personally don't feel like certainly reached his ceiling in this company, and rather unfortunate, of course.
Apollo Crews, we should probably mention, because he's another main roster man who's been around for years at this point, through all sorts of incarnations. And he is someone, to what I said earlier on about repackaging. They have tried to repackage when he went to NXT, had that sort of supernatural gimmick. He's been through everything with the Commander Aziz by his side. They've tried a lot with Apollo, and I feel, as cruel as it might sound to say it, this is one of the more understandable cuts in my view.
Understandable in that, like after a talent goes down to NXT to sort of rehabilitate or at least rework, their gimmick, and they're brought back up not to be used, where else does a talent go from there? It's not like you're going to be sent back to NXT to develop a new character. So I don't exactly like that. Was 2023 when he was brought back from NXT, and he's really done nothing since then. He was injured for a part of it there, but I agree, not that surprising. It was almost never featured on TV, and we look back, he might have had his most serious push as that sort of like Nigerian accent type of character with Commander Aziz by his side, which I guess only had a certain shelf life, but. He's another guy who I feel is so incredibly talented, and like he's got an amazing look. And I mean, his promo is probably not as strict, but it also wasn't that bad, So I would love to see what he does back, either in Japan or in AEW possibly.
Yeah. Alba Fire's another one I think we should mention. Part of the Secret Service. Piper Niven, pretty seriously injured, we feel. At least she's been on the shelf for a long time. So Alba was sort of left on her own with Chelsea Green as her sole, slagent. And she's been given the elbow. Of course, we know that her former tag team partner, remind me, Way.
Isla Dawn.
Isla Dawn got this treatment this time last year. So at that time, again, this is going to sound somewhat cruel, I was somewhat surprised that both of them didn't get their papers at the same time. But Alba has never really taken off in a way that's not as an adjunct to another talent. I think, it's either in a tag team or alongside Chelsea.
Yeah, I have to say, like, with Alba Fire in particular. First of all, like, she and Island On had that wonderful moment on that Scotland show, winning those tag titles, and they had that tag title run. But I can't really say it was a run that was all that notable because most of these tag title runs, unfortunately, in the women's division, are not booked to be that notable. But like her NXT UK run, where she was the longest reigning champion. I mean that. I think already speaks enough of maybe like her value and what she is able to bring to the table that I don't think has ever been translated very well to the main roster. So I can certainly say, like, in watching her, I'm sure Chelsea, like this was her lifeline. This whole run with Chelsea probably like saved her job for at least a year. But I can't ever say she looked committed to the part or that she felt appropriate for the part at all. Like, it felt like she was just sitting there and honestly counting down the days, which I I hope now that she's out of this, like, perhaps she can actually show what she's capable of. As she tweets herself here, her first tweet after this news came out, Kaylee Ray would batter Alba Fire. Just saying. So these sort of like, you know, people who seem like really pent up to want to prove themselves outside of the WWE character that the box that they're put into are often some of the most exciting ones. And certainly we open up the possibility of an Island On reunion, who possibly in Ring of Honor and possibly in AEW, and I guess therefore some sort of super faction with GYV as well, with all of them.
True, yeah, and people who remember Kaylee Ray as in the NXT UK system will know that she's a great worker. And like you said, Way, when she got the call up as a tag team, they were pretty good. But as the Secret Service person, like, she's just there to interfere on the apron to cause a distraction. And the very few singles matches that she's had, given virtually no time.
Yeah,
so I think there could be a new life for her.
Chelsea Green does tweet here, you guys didn't get to see how talented Kaylee Ray is. I know you saw bits and pieces, but trust me, there's so much more to her. She's a fearless wrestler. I'm sad to not have her on my side, but this is just the beginning for my girl. Thank you for having my back. Slagent A, love you.
Yeah. But yeah, of course, she's going to wrestle somewhere else. I'm pretty certain about that. I think we've covered most of the main roster folks.
Yeah, let's just go through some of the list here. We got Andre Chase, who, like, this gimmick he's been doing since 2021 and, certainly got over in the PC. But for whatever reason, they never wanted to give the gimmick a chance on the main roster. And when a gimmick has been in developmental since 2021, especially like for 5 years now, especially now when there's so many more people that they're pushing up, and NXT is even, it seems like very like difficult to get airtime for. I mean, the writing was kind of on the wall for this one. They had the group essentially ended in 2024 with that Ridge Holland feud, and there was a bit of a half-assed attempt to restart it with Uriah Connors, and when he left, I mean, unfortunately, nothing else for Andre Chase, which is sad because he's a very talented person, clearly. Tyra May Steele is an interesting one. This is, of course, what's her real name? Tamara May Stock?
Mensa Stock?
Tyra Mensa Stock, yes. Okay. Tyra May Steele, she is the LFG Season 1 winner here, and made some NXT main roster appearances, has been wrestling on Evolve, but, like, because of her background, you would figure she'd be given a bit of a longer rope to develop and more time to develop. But, again, we don't know the circumstances behind the departure, but this is one that is going to end right here.
Yeah, I don't know a great deal about Tamara Mensa Stock other than, she's an Olympic gold medalist at the 2020 Games. 33, so, not too old to develop, you would have thought. But again, we're left with speculation about the reasons for all of these. It's hard to believe that they're all roster cuts in the sense of we're going to release you from your contract. Maybe a few people had voiced the desire to leave, and this was the day they were just going to, on a Friday night, dump everybody.
Certainly,
it's difficult to know.
Certainly, certainly. So we'll see where she turns up. I mean, if Gable Steveson was in a very similar situation and now looks to be headed fully into a career in MMA. So we'll see what Tyra May Steele does in the future. And then we got Malik Blade, Luca Crucifino. Malik Blade, not somebody I think you would have heard from so much. Had a team with Edris Enofe, who's also no longer on the roster. Only had 4 house shows since he came back from injury late last year. Luca Crucifino, of course, was in the faction with Tony D'Angelo. He was building to this he was developing a new Raver character in Evolve, and I was very excited to maybe see it continue, but I guess they weren't as impressed with what he was working on. Then we also have a few LFG participants here in Chris Island, Serena Linton, and Trill London, who I can't really say I could say much about.
LFG isn't shown where I live, even so. I'm not at all familiar with these folks, and I have to admit, in the time I have to devote to wrestling outside of my proper job and all the rest of it, Evolve is not on my schedule either. So a lot of those talents are just people I'm not familiar with. But I think what it goes to show is, there was a trailer in tonight's SmackDown for the new season of LFG, and it's like, there's no, you could impress all of these legends and be a future great, to be to give the LFG letters their meaning, and just be on the chopping block in no time.
Yeah, but at this point, this seems to be at least some pattern that is being established of these roster cuts happening the week after WrestleMania, in conjunction with main roster debuts, and the ladder constantly moving up. And that feels like it's a process that might be greater now than it ever has been. This machine is just moving at a much faster pace, and people are maybe more replaceable than ever, especially if you're in the mid card.
Yeah, I really agree with you there. It goes back to something I said earlier on. Instead of having to repackage existing wrestlers whose gimmicks are perhaps not working out or storylines aren't great, they have a very deep pool right down into the WWE ID program at this point, where they can call people up, and given the reality of the independent contractor system, and the fact that a lot of these people's dream is to get to WrestleMania, get to WWE, there's pretty much an endless pipeline that they can mine instead of having to try and repackage talent that they already have, who perhaps, to be mercenary about it, to be the accountant here, perhaps their pay scale is not matching what they're doing on television in terms of just standing around listening to R-Truth tell you how to log into ESPN.
Well, that might be how the accountant would talk about it. I mean, they certainly have plenty to celebrate here, and I suppose part of that celebration is making sure that you keep your costs low, which on this, any thoughts on that? On the same week that they're announcing, I mean, they're constantly announcing these successes, but on the same week that we're hearing about these bonuses to TKO executives also getting this sort of news out there, do you think TKO cares at all? No. We're talking about a storm of bad PR, you could suggest, over the course of WrestleMania build, the road to WrestleMania, and it kind of culminates seemingly in something like this.
It's a very easy no to that question. I don't think they give a shit. They've had probably the second most successful financially WrestleMania ever. If it had been the most, they would have said so. But I think some of the gate loss was more than compensated for by a bigger site fee and the filming tax credit in Nevada. John and Brandon have been over all of this on Pollock and Thurston last night. A very, very, very successful WrestleMania. I think I'm talking about it purely in financial terms, and I think that's what TKO cares about. As long as they can wring a bit of extra ticket price money out of people, as long as they can get their FIPs, their financial incentive packages from cities and municipalities to host their events, as long as they can shift merch, I don't really think they care very much that the product is perhaps not getting critical acclaim, particularly night one of WrestleMania, which I haven't really had a chance to talk to you about, but I thought was dire, and it was really just very bad. night of WrestleMania. So long way of saying, no, I don't think TKO cares about the publicity at all. Just look at the Andreas Hale story. I mean, that didn't even really take off beyond the wrestling bubble as a mainstream ESPN combat sports reporter, an actual journalist, just being knocked back credentials wise, seemingly because of letter grades and perhaps a story on the Janelle Grant.
A story like that, like really, it seems like so within the bubble of what I think this company only cares about, which is headlines that might affect the stock. And when you take that into account, the news of roster members being cut is probably actually positive news for people who only care about that number, knowing that, less money would be going to production while profits continue to rise.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's the era we're in now.
That
is absolutely the era we're in now with TKO, and you see it everywhere. You visually see it when you watch the shows because the mat is covered in sponsorships. The PLEs have 4-minute ad breaks in them, and then everything is sponsored, right up to somebody sitting mute at the announce desk.
All right. More on this, of course, in the days to come. We hope, of course, that is the end of this particular story for this. But if you want to keep up with it, go to postwrestling.com. I'm sure more will be discussed about it in the weeks to come.
Okay, I've got a few more stories, Wade, and then we'll get to SmackDown. The Berwyn Eagles Club, there's been a twist in this never-ending saga of the Berwyn Eagles Club. To recap really quickly for anyone who hasn't been following, it's a venue in Illinois, a longtime home for AAW, which is having its final show there tonight. And just as a by the by, John has put a story up to show that Seth Rollins made an appearance there. Obviously, big fan of the Chicago Bears, and probably has a bit of a history with Black and Brave and some of his students, perhaps himself.
He's wrestled in AAW in the past. So yeah, I saw some clips of this, came out to his old music before, the whole Burn It Down thing. I didn't get to hear his promo just yet, but, got an incredible response. I mean, people were certainly not expecting, a WrestleMania level, talent to show up in this little small venue. And then they proceeded to chant Tyler Black at him, and he seemed to, react with a bit of emotion here. So, yep, that is out there right now.
Yeah. So the club, you will know that this is the club where it had the March 28th Ruthless Pro Wrestling event. That's the one with the alleged phantom stabbing of Mads Kruger that the Berwyn Police Department and many others later confirmed never happened. And GoFundMe was launched. This has been reported, and we've talked about it on the venue's behalf, with the claim that the club had, and I'm quoting, lost its license and is no longer allowed to host wrestling shows. So this is the new bit. This week, a Chicago Sun-Times reporter spoke with Berwyn's city attorney and the chief of police there, who both confirmed that the venue's entertainment license has not been revoked. The chief of police, Michael Fellows, said the Eagles Club currently pays money to have present one police officer during wrestling events. And after the brawl of March, the police department had recommended bumping that number up to paying for 4 police officers to be on site. So we're left in a bit of confusion. The fundraiser's central claim of losing its license doesn't really seem to stack up to what the city is saying. Chuck Moreau Sr., who runs the club as a trustee and secretary, declined to be interviewed by the Sun-Times. Post has reached out to John Kraft, who launched the GoFundMe, to see if he has some more clarity on this. There's a funny little tale here too, just as a side. Brandon Thurston on behalf of Post spoke back on April 9th with someone at the Eagles Club who identified themselves by name as an officer of the club, and attributed the end of wrestling at the venue to, quote, concerns raised by the police and the town, which of course is not the loss of the license. So as of now, by the way, Brandon then called back to confirm, got the guy's name, and this person then denied ever having the conversation, but
Is anybody telling the truth in this entire story?
This Twilight Zone story. I thought it was over a few weeks ago when we had the final police report saying, okay, we're shutting the case. There was no stabbing. And then we had the next chapter, and it was the club is going to have to close, or it's in financial straits, and there's a GoFundMe because it has to give up wrestling. And now we simply don't know what's going on. There certainly seems to be an issue, but it's speculation at the moment. We will get, as you said on Blue Sky, way the saga continues, but Post will get to the bottom of it. I have great faith in Brandon and in John and their contacts to find out what's going on here. It could be that they simply can't afford to have 4 police officers and compensate the PD to do that for every wrestling show. There may be something to do with the liquor license, which is a separate issue from an entertainment's license, but the story continues.
Oh, some bit of information is going to completely shift this into a whole nother direction. I'm positive by next week. So
I expect to be covering this in September.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, a bit more of an upbeat story. There's been some resolution, at least in one of the recent TNA inter-promotional disputes. You remember the TNA pulled several of its talents from indie matches against AEW wrestlers, citing partner conflicts. One of the most high-profile cancellations was Leon Slater versus Ricochet at WrestleCon's Mark Hitchcock Memorial Super Show last weekend. At the time, WrestleCon owner Michael Bocchicchio, who appeared on one of Post's special daily shows during WrestleMania week, was pretty publicly frustrated about this. He told Post on April 14th he hadn't heard from TNA President Carlos Silva at all since Slater had been pulled. On Thursday evening, Bocchicchio posted an update to social media, quote, "He took a beating the last few weeks, so I want to give Carlos Silva his props today. A week ago, he called me personally to explain his reasoning for pulling the match. He then asked if there was anything he could do to make up for it. I simply asked that he reimburse me for Leon's flights and hotel since he was no longer wrestling for us. Today, I was reimbursed for the flight and hotel as promised. Thank you, Carlos." End quote. So Silva did eventually call, did explain himself, did offer to make some part of it right, at least, and follow through. So perhaps somewhat of a resolution, all things considered. That said, we still don't know the exact nature of the explanation given to Michael about the partner conflicts, but at least he seems satisfied with this resolution.
Yeah. Listen, I guess I'm glad this occurred. I suppose you still have to ask, why didn't it occur sooner? And why did Michael Bocchicchio have to wait for Dave Meltzer and the internet to inform him about something like this rather than Carlos Silva directly? And why at the time of the interview we conducted with him, Carlos Silva had yet to, well, I guess, formally have a conversation with Michael Bocchicchio yet. So, I mean, better late than never, I suppose, but I think it still calls into great question about how Carlos Silva and TNA by extension handled this entire mess of a situation.
Agreed. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The fact that it took to this point to be recompensed for the flights and hotel that had already been paid for, even that's a bit of an indictment in my view. Evil, the latest on Evil. Mike Johnson is reporting that former IWGP World Heavyweight Champion Evil, real name Takahi Watanabe, has indeed signed with WWE. This would only confirm what has been in the ether for quite a long time. Not belabor this story. He had his final match in a loss to Aaron Wolf at Wrestle Kingdom in January. Comes away after having, an IWGP heavyweight title, an intercontinental title, 4 never openweight championships, pretty well decorated. The expectation in Japan is he won't keep the Evil name. I think that's everyone's expectation. And there's a bit of a tease that he could end up in NXT at the Revenge special this week. Tony D'Angelo received a box with a Japanese symbol of war on it. So make of that what you will. Any thoughts, Way?
I'm just like, I'm still flabbergasted that, like, of all the possible talent that you would be able to sign from that company, that they chose Evil. But of course, though I wouldn't say confirmed, but like at least connections to Io Sky, of course it makes sense. I shouldn't probably feel that way because I mean you never know. You never know how a talent might translate and how a talent might get over from one company to another or what unique creative they may have. My guess is that they would probably do something very similar to the evil gimmick, or at least in look. And so NXT would be an interesting place to debut him. Like you would think somebody as accomplished as he is might make a direct jump to the main roster, but of course, I don't think like the time in NXT, which at this point almost seems like a luxury rather than like something that a talent kind of has to work through. Like it's a luxury to get time in NXT to develop before you get that chance on the main roster. I think it'll do him good. So.
I think so too.
Let's see.
He's 39, so he's sort of on the cusp, I think, of what you might expect for an NXT talent. But perhaps this is going to be a sort of a launch pad to like get him TV ready, as it were. The old cliche about the hard cam and all of that.
I'm very curious to hear what an English promo will sound like from Evo.
Same here, yeah. One final really quick note, WWE has announced Night of Champions for June 27th in Riyadh. I know whether it's contractually they just have to at this point. I mean, tickets supposedly go on sale on Monday. It's worth noting the context. There's been very real doubt about whether this show will go ahead, given the ongoing US and Israel-Iran conflict in the Middle East. WrestleVotes had reported fairly recently, within the past couple of weeks, that some inside WWE had thought the PLE was doubtful at best. Nick Khan said more recently in an interview that plans hadn't changed. There could be all sorts of reasons why for this, including event insurance and all sorts of reasons why they have to continue until perhaps there's government advice that says, on the US side, perhaps it says you shouldn't do this. As everyone knows, WrestleMania 43 is scheduled for Riyadh next year. So we'll see if this actually comes to pass.
2 months is not that much time. So, I mean, you're talking about the company that continued to put on shows every single week during the pandemic. So I feel like they will probably try to make this happen, as best as they can, if there's money to be made, of course. So,
I mean, we don't even really have a functional ceasefire over there at the moment, so it will be interesting to see. But like you said, if they can make it happen, they will, I'm sure.
All right. Thank you very much, Neal, for all of that news. And of course, for more, go to postwrestling.com, where John Pollock, Jack Wannon, Neal Flanagan, John Kleinchester, Brandon Thurston, our entire team is hard at work at bringing you top stories all the time. All right, let's go over to tonight's edition of SmackDown. This is, of course, a big one. It is the SmackDown after WrestleMania, and this one comes to us from Fort Worth, Texas. Fort Worth, Texas, where, according to WrestleTix, let me just drag all my notes out here, about 9,655 tickets distributed. And we start things off here with Jacob Fatu, who talks about Roman Reigns, saying he's not ready to challenge him for his title. He says he's been hearing this sort of thing his whole life. But Roman, if you think I'm not ready, then step into this ring and prove it. So out come his cousins, the Usos, here to talk about some sense into Jacob per Roman's direction. Jimmy says you can have what the OTC has. You can level your family up, but don't come at the OTC. You'll eat and level up by taking Cody out for his championship. Then you can join us in the bloodline. And at this point, the crowd starts chanting Fatu, Fatu, seemingly encouraging him to not join the bloodline. Jimmy calls the audience fools who can't change his kid's lifestyle. Jay says, Jay kind of takes a different perspective. Jimmy is very much like, we want you to join us. Jay is more like dismissive. He's a lot more combative with Jacob Fatu. He says, it's too little too late, little cousin. You stepped up, you opened your mouth, you're in the deep end, and we're going to see if you can swim. If you want respect from Roman, get ready for war. At this point, they are interrupted by more family here in Solo Sikoa and the MFTs. Solo says these two, citing Jimmy and Jay, are liars. They didn't want you in the WWE in the first place. I was the one who brought you here. Solo says if you want to beat Roman, then I can do that for you with the help of my family. Now Tama Tonga takes the mic. He does not like this. He tells Solo, why are we wasting our time with this? He can't beat Roman Reigns. He can't even beat you. At this point, Jacob super kicks Tama, says the only person he should be talking to right now is Roman Reigns. But if Solo doesn't think he can beat him, well, then let's have a match tonight. So that is our main event tonight, Jacob Fatu versus Solo Sikoa, where Jacob can see if he can beat Solo and get his win back. So they're positioning Jacob really as the hottest free agent amongst these two branches of the bloodline, and really making him look like the belle of the ball here. What did you think about this segment?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. It wasn't quite sort of WrestleMania build worthy, the sort of things we were getting in the run up to Mania, but actually somewhat refreshing to get away from Cody and Randy at this point. And I like this direction for Jacob. I thought it was somewhat surprising and refreshing when he turned up on Raw. It's not an enviable position to be the first challenger to a new champion in the shape of Roman. But Jacob is credible. He's very well liked. I think he'll be pretty well protected in this feud. And this opening segment was pretty effective, and it's reestablishing sort of the realignment of the wider, Reigns Fatu bloodline. And I thought this was good, particularly when you remember that these guys, the Usos and Jacob, really are first cousins. They share a surname in real life, and Solo again, because of course he's the Usos' younger brother. So yeah, I thought this was a good, well done, well delivered opening segment to SmackDown. Whether it was thrilling, as a follow up to WrestleMania, is a different question.
Well, I mean, to me, so much of WrestleMania, the post-WrestleMania season, is about building up your next generation. And to have Jacob Fatu essentially be the main character of tonight's show, I thought was a great way of, again, putting that spotlight, putting that shine on Jacob. As always, Jacob, whenever given that sort of like focus, really steps up. Like, he feels to me like a main character level type of like personality.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I thought he did fantastic. And just to have everybody want him, again, I thought like made him look, like $1 million here. This was, in my opinion, the most heelish we've heard the Usos be in years, at least in Jimmy here, where he is called the audience fools for encouraging Jacob to not join the bloodline. So I wonder if that is a tease of some, like, of the confirmation of where the bloodline with Roman Reigns are headed towards. But of course, they're not full heels, not nearly full heels yet, Let's go up next to Giulia and Kiana James there with Kathy Kelly. Kiana James says that they are upset about the lack of respect that they were given by not having a match at WrestleMania. Giulia says that she beat Tiffany once and she will do it again. And she doesn't feel pressure tonight, just anger as she looks towards Kiana James. So they are, although I didn't think this was very well conveyed in this segment, but they are teasing a breakup between Kiana James and Giulia over Giulia blaming Kiana James for not using her managerial skills well enough to get them a match on WrestleMania.
Yeah, Kiana rather's entire gimmick when she came in was that she's this master of negotiation. You really want to get signed up to her talent agency or whatever. So she failed to get one of the champions onto WrestleMania. Arguably, Giulia should be pissed off with her, and you're right that it wasn't conveyed particularly clearly. But by the end, I kind of picked up on it that when Giulia said, "I only feel anger," and she gives Kiana the death stare, you kind of okay, I get what they're doing here.
So we get
bring it on. By the way,
bring it on. What do you mean?
These two, and get to the other side of it.
Oh, okay. You're very much looking forward to this feud.
I'm looking forward to it being a necessary step to having them separated.
Right, yes. Let's go to our match itself, which is Tiffany Stratton versus Giulia here for the United States Championship, of course. Tiffany Stratton won a non-title match Giulia won the non-title match between the two of them 2 weeks ago. Stratton last week won a number one contenders match against Jordynne Grace. Giulia shoves Stratton off the corner as she goes for the prettiest moonsault ever, following up with a neckbreaker off the apron as we go to commercial break. Back from break, Stratton delivers Jay Lethal's lethal injection to Giulia. So, between this and like the BME, maybe she's just like a massive late 2000s TNA fan.
Yeah,
Tiffany Stratton,
massive mark.
So, Love that. Or maybe her coaches are, back there. James tries to trip Stratton up, leading to a friendly fire spot with Giulia on the apron. Rolling senton from Stratton sets up the PME, but Giulia catches her into the Rings of Saturn submission, which in Stardom she used to call Bianca. Giulia, and I guess we can see why she doesn't use that name here. Giulia goes for the Northern Lights bomb, but it's countered with an Alabama slam, and then the prettiest moonsault ever, giving Tiffany Stratton the victory and the championship here. Are you United States champion Tiffany Stratton? Your thoughts on the match?
First of all, this was, I don't know how many orders of magnitude better than the first time that these two had their encounter a couple of weeks ago. That was a very poor match and somewhat botch filled. This was much, much better. It was pretty brief, but compared to that match, I think it might have been 3 weeks ago. That one was lousy, and I remember saying to you at the time that both of these women will want to have another go at this, and I think they redeemed themselves tonight. This was very good, I thought, and it's an interesting direction to put a bit of steam behind Tiffany again, who's felt rather forgotten in the run up to WrestleMania.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought this match went at a pretty strong and active pace. Certainly, the two of them had a bit of a chip on their shoulder after probably unsatisfying performance last time around. I thought this card was up for everything after the commercial break. Certainly, so they do blame the loss. The commentators do on the Kiana James friendly fire spot. So of course that leads to the further breakup tensions between Kiana James and Giulia. But Tiffany Stratton as the U.S. champion to me is. This is the position she should have been in from the beginning if there was a U.S. championship when she debuted. It is the right level of development for her. It's one that hopefully highlights her in-ring ability, and I think hopefully would help this championship be rebranded as more of the workhorse title of this division, of this company. So, her character work, her in-ring, I think has only gotten better. Her character work has kind of flatlined, in my opinion. I don't sense that much improvement since even her days in NXT. She's still very reliant on that catchphrase that I think she just overuses way too often. And I just don't think she has shown enough wrinkles to really hit that next gear, hit that next level. So hopefully she can continue to have great matches, be put into a consistent spot on the show while she continues developing interesting stories as a sort of a side effect of all that TV time. So I would love to see her try the open challenge gimmick with this. That
would be interesting. Yeah, I think some wrinkle, some level of edge needs to be injected into this character. Sometimes it's when in doubt, press the heel turn button. I don't really want to see that. I'd rather they try to experiment with just adding a little more to her character. If she's able to carry that off, we'll see. I mean, I certainly hope so. On the other side, I would just, like to say, for Giulia, we're headed for a Kiana Giulia program. And as I alluded to there before, I'd be very happy to get to the other side of that because Giulia is a top tier wrestler. I think this partnership's been weird from the beginning, hasn't really worked out. They don't have much chemistry. And, this is a wrestler who was on par with Stephanie Verker in NXT, and hopes were very high upon her call-up, and it's been a bit of a mess thus far. So really any change of direction, even, I don't mind that she's lost the title. I don't think it really ever did anything for her.
Danhausen is facing The Miz tonight, and to build to that story, we have a series of vignettes that were shot earlier in the week at The Miz's house. So Danhausen is at The Miz's house, uninvited. He just shows up via celebrity map, exaggerated celebrity map. Miz cannot believe Danhausen is here, tells him to leave, but Danhausen has teleported into a swimming pool. Miz is, I want to describe him as Mr. Wilson from Dennis the Menace angry. I would just say cartoonish, comically angry. He dives towards Danhausen in the pool. Danhausen, of course, moves out of the way, and Miz splashes into the pool while wearing his own clothes. So, I'm probably not doing the recap justice. It's hard to recap this without, as an adult, without not seeming annoyed by it. But I totally think this is a great way to continue Danhausen's, television appearances and to build Danhausen.
I think you and I both have been calling for more vignettes.
Yeah.
Can we please see these characters outside of the backstage area and the ring? Because it's good for character development. It's good for breaking up a long show. This had only a few moments that were genuinely kind of clever, entertaining, and it's in several parts. We'll get another part later. A lot of it was a bit of an eye roll for me, I have to say, and in part because the audience were not mic'd for this, so this was all sort of shown in dead silence, a bit like an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm or something. And so to have absolutely no audience reaction to what's supposed to be funny, and you're not laughing at home, or at least I wasn't. I
was on my floor,
howling.
my ribs were breaking. They were broken from laughing so hard at this, Neal. So speak for yourself.
Okay.
I totally agree with you. I think this was missing some form of either laugh track or maybe like Looney Tunes type of like soundtrack beneath it, maybe just to kind of really sell the tone and vibe of the thing, because it was certainly played for slapsticky laughs. And I think it was just maybe missing that one element to really kind of hit the note home. But I will also suggest, I guarantee you, the people that are buying these Danhausen t-shirts, the little kids that are reacting so well to this character right now, probably love this shit. And they probably are on their website and asking their parents or taking their parents' credit cards to order more merch. So I would suggest, to me, this was overall positive and strong, even follow-up for Danhausen coming off of the John Cena interaction at Mania.
Yeah.
Kathy Kelly is in the back with Tiffany Stratton, our new U.S. champion. She says, well, she's had the runner-up story for the better part of last year, but not tonight. She is here to show that the WWE Universe runs on Tiffy time, in case you forgot what her catchphrase was. Yeah. She is interrupted, by Brie, Bella, and Paige, the new tag team champions, who walk out not to interact with her, but to lead to our crossover segment coming up next here. So Brie wishes her sister Nikki a speedy recovery, of course. She says that she was thankful when she came up with the idea to call Paige to replace her, and says, "Welcome back, Paige." Paige says, "I'm back." Says she lost her voice after a hectic week, and her voice did sound raspy, but she was able to pull off the promo here. When Brie called her last week, she thought that it was a wonderful way to come home, and it was a rough road to get here, but she's happy to be home. I mean, this was a very sanitized and I would say cleaner version of, I think, like the story she told on the Stephanie podcast, which she came across, I would say, very honest and authentic and very likable in. So if you want maybe the longer promo, listen to that. She says SmackDown is my house. Brie and I aren't going anywhere. So out comes Charlotte and Alexa. They're happy to see them back, but they're not going to let Mania stop them from regaining their championships. Charlotte challenges them to a match, which Brie and Paige accepts. And so we get our match coming up next. Do you have any thoughts on how these two might have sounded on the microphone in their first appearance as a team?
I've heard you say on Rewind to Raw a couple of times, Wade, that the delivery of both the Bellas, to be honest, isn't always wonderful. And I occasionally catch, particularly for news segments, parts of their podcast where they're just chatting together. I mean, they've got bags of personality, but I just felt that Brie's initial delivery was very kind of monotone, and I've got my lines up in my head and I need to deliver them. To the point that, the audience didn't quite catch on to the fact that they were meant to start a welcome back chant, for Paige. They did do so eventually. So yeah, some of the delivery here, not wonderful. And the same goes for Charlotte and Alexa, but we say that every week.
I'll say I felt Paige sounded way more natural. Like, to me, I think she was always a pretty strong promo, especially in WWE versus AEW, where I don't think it just wasn't the same, But here, I thought she sounded like confident. She projected well, and certainly in contrast to many, but especially Brie, who I think has really yet to find her pro wrestling voice. She sounded very strong. So we get the match here. It's Brie, Bella, and Paige versus Charlexa here. So they are back with back from commercial with Brie getting beaten down and the crowd chanting, "We want Paige." Brie is really, really close to getting the tag, but here comes the debuting JC Jane, pulling Paige from the corner, driving her right into the steel steps. She is followed by Lainey Reed and Fallon Henley coming in, and they are attacking everybody in the ring. All 3 members of Fatal Attraction have been called up here, and this is our first call-up of, well, I guess the first 3 call-ups of this particular show on SmackDown. A bit of a surprise here, because for me at least, Neal, I'm surprised I haven't made that mistake more often, but as far as like call-ups go, we don't usually see factions get brought up together out of NXT. Usually one person gets brought up and then the others maybe stay behind to either take over the faction or to lead their own story. And I thought they would spend a bit more time developing Fallon, Henley, and Lainey Reed here, but of course this makes sense, you know, like especially considering the incredible influx of people they have coming into NXT and how, again, TV time on NXT now is a luxury to have. And so I think the bar for determining whether somebody is ready is a lot different now, maybe in 2026 than it might have been maybe 3-4 years ago. There are just so many people, and when you look at it, I mean, JC Jane, of course, is more than ready, but Fallon Henley and I would say Lainey Reed, I think are, as proven maybe tonight, like more than TV ready for this sort of, at least to start, supporting role. Would you say, Neal? What did you think about this call?
I agree with you 100%. I feel it's no real surprise to see JC Jane make it to the main roster. I was somewhat surprised to see all 3 of them together and interested by that. I thought, oh, that's quite a cool move to bring all the Fatal Influence together in the call up. Let's see how they do. And I was very impressed by, you know, not so much this beatdown. I mean, anyone could do that, but their performance throughout this show, I think all 3 of them was very strong. So I agree with you that if this first episode with the 3 of them together is anything to go by, this is a strong call up.
Yeah, Jane and Reed have both been signed since 2021. So Jane and Henley have both been signed since 2021. So for the both of them, certainly it's been time. But like Lainey Reed, I mean, kind of lucked out here, you know, joining the group just in October here. Like she's kind of like the Ringo Starr of the group, you know, like she comes in and but like Ringo Starr, she is very good, and you can certainly see from her in-ring work. You could make the argument she might be the best of the 3 in-ring. So I'm very excited to see how all of them develop. I thought, like you said, a lot more to come here with this group on this particular episode for their debut. Royce Keys, we get another Royce Keys video here. The former mayor of East Palo Alto talks about how the town now has embraced Keys as somebody to look up to. They speak to his former childhood friend, a local barber, a cop is talking about, again, what an inspiration Royce Keys is. So these vignettes are fantastic, and I wonder how many of these that we have. Like I thought, like okay, like he's won the Andre now. He's debuted. Maybe we'll just get
I
these
thought
every
we were
week.
done for these. We're just going to go back to East Palo Alto every week now and speak to, I don't know, the sanitation guy. You know, we've already had his teachers, I think. So I don't know, just everyone.
We will talk to every single citizen of East Palo Alto about Royce Keys.
But very effective in baby facing this guy. You know, it's you know, he's the best thing ever. He's coming to East Palo Alto, and a huge inspiration to that town.
We go up next to Cody Rhodes making an appearance on this show. I would say Cody getting a mixed reaction here to start, and that at this point it's not that unusual. In fact, again, Cody seems to happy to leave room for these reactions. But of course, more important is the reaction that he will leave to, and we will get to that soon. What do you want to talk about? I want to talk about the way I left WrestleMania. I got knocked out, and I still made the choice to get back up and walk up the ramp. And by doing so, I wanted to send a message to Randy Orton that despite my busted eye, stitches in the back of my head, I'm still standing. He talks about sending a message to a very condescending Sami Zayn who called him the Golden Boy. And so that's why he showed up dressed in all gold for his entrance at WrestleMania. And all his friends are dressed in gold and his family is dressed in gold. And the crowd at this point, because Cody Rhodes is such a great speaker, they start chanting Cody, Cody, Cody. He says the most important message he wants to send is to the outside forces that keep trying to interject in his WrestleMania plans. He tells them, you guys are 0 for 3. Send your best or count your money and mind your damn business. And And they certainly did that tonight. So he tells all of his future challengers, whether you're from NXT, Raw, or SmackDown, that I'm easy to find but hard to beat. And leaves to, I would say, a pretty unanimous ovation from this entire crowd that might have given him a mixed one to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's a master at somewhat letting them in on a few things. It's just small little parts of this promo where, he talks about he wanted to go right back up the ramp, even though he couldn't see out of one eye and he was bloodied and half conscious. He wouldn't take, hey, we call it loser's lane, that kind of side beside the rampway and stuff. So a really effective promo from Cody. I think they played into this sort of the forces above thing quite well. I would at this point kind of leave that alone. But you got the reaction, the desired reaction was, and it was a good idea also, I'll just throw in there, to not have Randy on the show, I think.
It was a fantastic promo, a fantastic babyface promo. One that he, again, just sort of like almost a post-match celebration, throws the call out to all the challengers, whether you're from NXT, Raw, or SmackDown. And some of those names we can talk about maybe very shortly that have some history with Cody Rhodes that'll be on SmackDown. Threw shots at Orton, threw shots at Sammy in particular, which might lead directly to, I think, our next big program between those two. And of course, TKO still dangling that storyline out there. I have to think with full confidence of some sort of reveal at some point, right, Neal? Like, this TKO versus Cody story is still very much alive, would you say?
Well, he's still referring to it, so you would think so, but I can't for the life of me think of an effective story here, other than one that involves Dwayne, and I really don't know that, because he's in storyline and in what people know, he's the board member of TKO. That's a really well-known quantity. I say this week in and week out, people, I don't think the crowd know who Ari Emanuel is, so I just wonder where they're going with this. There might be something teed up for SummerSlam, there may not.
But I will say, as great as this promo is, it makes me that much more confused about why he worked almost the entirety of his match on Saturday as a heel. And to me, the punt being such a babyface move, I feel like he left as a heel, and Randy Orton the opposite as a babyface. But maybe that was just my particular read of it. But on this particular show, he was just 100% babyface.
Yeah, and I think that's the lane he should stay in, because as John often says, and I'm just going to echo him here, that when you get a babyface that's this over, that's difficult to achieve, and if you can hold on to it, why do a heel turn when you've got this guy who can be kind of a modern day Cena?
So then, modern day Cena certainly was able to balance, or at least both reactions very well. So maybe that's what Cody is certainly inspired by. We get the MFTs in Solo. Certainly, right now he says he wants the tag titles back, so let's focus on that. So then we got our match. It's Tama Tonga and JC Mateo taking on R-Truth and Damian Priest here. We go through a commercial break as Priest builds to a hot tag from Truth here. Truth comes in, does his Cena 5 moves of doom. Tongaloa at this point on the outside distracts the referee, allowing Tama to deliver the Tongan twist. Then the German from Jeff Cobb for 2. Priest and Truth then come back in. They deliver their finisher, the Rise Up, which is their flapjack, jumping flatliner combo for the victory. The crowd sounded really hot for this after the commercial break. Your thoughts on the match? I
thought it was a decent enough tag match, nothing particularly special. It was very WWE. TV match, but very well executed for all of that. The crowd are up for this sort of thing. It doesn't enthuse me that much to see Ron Killings do the tribute stuff to Cena every week, but the crowd in attendance, particularly here in Fort Worth, seem to love it. So if it's having the desired effect, and that's all I have to say about it.
I'll say, like, if maybe the Motor City Machine Guns, their release, and also Street Profits moving to Raw is any indication, it feels like maybe any sort of ambitions of wanting SmackDown to be like your sort of work rate division is really all but gone here. I mean, the only teams that are left are the Los Garzas. You got Fraxium here, and that's kind of it. So But you know, you can't say this is not working to some degree, right? You know, like these crowds were reacting really well for Truth and his Cena moves and everything. So that seems to be at least in decent shape here. We get Miz and Danhausen in their latest chapter here, back at the Miz Resort. Danhausen is playing in Miz's virtual golf deal, and he hits Miz in the balls, of course, with the golf club.
Yeah.
He grabs Miz's slammy, and of course he breaks it. This is when Maurice shows up at the front door, and Miz. So, can you explain to me, Neal? Is this a thing? Like, do people have like bowls of cocoa powder at the front of their house?
I
some
didn't
reason?
know what the hell was going on with this. It was this makeup powder. Was it what was it? And I just came up with cooking ingredients is just what I put down on my notes.
Miz tasted it and said, "Oh, chocolate."
Okay then. Fair
So
enough.
I mean, it could not be might not be chocolate. It doesn't have to be. But what exactly did Maurice get hit by here?
I guess it's cocoa powder. Let's go with that.
Why would somebody have a bowl of cocoa powder at their front door?
He was bringing it into the kitchen to do some cooking and forgot.
Gotcha. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's a detail that I missed. Anyway, so Miz wants to throw the powder at Danhausen here, but unfortunately he catches Maurice instead. So ha ha ha.
Danhausen teleports many times in these clips, where every time Miz looks away, he's somewhere else.
Listen, I think they're doing it. I personally think they're doing a good job, even though I sense the comedy might not necessarily for you or I, Neal, but I think they're doing a good job. I think a laugh track would probably add to it. Just
I mean, the golf club to the nuts could have had a boing sort of sound effect or something, maybe some sliding whistle sound effects. The way I did chuckle a little bit when Danhausen thought that Mrs. Cybertruck was a spaceship. And then he rode off on the daughter's little bicycle. That was the one bit that kind of amused me enough to probably have at least an internal chuckle. The rest was a bit of an eye roller, but I know what you mean. The kids would really, really like this.
Maybe next week they'll get you, Neal. They'll get your exact brand of humor right. All right. So up next we got a Trick Williams celebration. He's coming to the ring here with Yachty and the Gingerbread Man again. Yachty makes a comment about passing the celebrity road to WrestleMania, yet he's still here. So this is his way of saying, I'm not like those other celebrities who only come around for WrestleMania season. I am here to stay. So Trick says this is Trick Yachty gang now, and they kind of do a back and forth where, they kind of compare each other to perhaps talent coach or hype man positions. I guess like Phil Jackson to Trick's Michael Jordan here. The great hype man, Phil Jackson. Yachty announces that they're getting rid of the U.S. Open Challenge because, you got to work to face Trick Williams here. So while Trick's music plays to end the segment, the Gingerbread Man comes in and attacks Trick and Yachty from behind with a candy cane, later revealing himself to be Sami Zayn, who continues the beatdown here, delivering a haluva kick to Trick Williams, and Sami gets a ton of boos here. Maybe on the surface something that was obvious, but for me, I don't know why. I never really thought about this. So the reveal I thought was actually a really strong reveal. What did you think about the segment?
It was good. I like the way that Yachty and Trick sort of vibe together. They clearly are actually friends in real life, and the sort of interplay between the two of them. If you're Michael Jackson, I'm Quincy Jones, and if you're, like you said, these sort of coach or producer type things, that all worked. There's still a tiny bit heelish, the kind of like, well, we're taking away the open challenge, so there's a little bit of edge to them, but I think that really works.
The content of the promo, you can argue, is heelish, but the swag totally screams babyface, and that's why these crowds are going crazy for him.
Yeah, the crowds are not going to boo these guys. And then the reveal of Sami was, by the end, you could sort of see it coming. That candy cane, pretty clear, sort of, to be used as a weapon. My big question about this way is, how long has Sami been with them in that costume? Because at the very beginning of this episode of SmackDown, the three of them emerged from a bus. arriving at the arena. They always have the arrivals at the start. We don't go over that because there's nothing to say about them. But I did note that the three of them got off the bus together. I'd like an explanation of that. Now, it could be as simple as Sammy got the other guy needed to go. Some other guy was in the costume. He needed to go to the bathroom. Sammy ambushed him and stole the costume. Or maybe Sammy's been with them for a week.
Yeah, I'd like to think 5 days, like immediately after the match, like he came up with this plan and just like, I don't know, took out whoever was there and just stayed in the suit this entire time.
Yeah, he's just been hanging in the corner, silent, for a week to do this.
So this seems destined for backlash, some sort of rematch, and I don't think I would expect a title change, but you never really know because I think they do have something big planned for Sammy coming out of all this as a heel. So, man, Trick is just doing so well. Like with these promos, the charisma is just it really is approaching like Rock levels. You know?
I don't think that's overstatement. He's got it.
So Royce Keys is in the back with Kathy Kelly. He mentions that his emotions have been everywhere since his debut, and he's only getting started. And this is when Solo Sikoa interacts with him once again. He says Tala isn't too happy about losing the Andre last week, but he's staying at home tonight, which kind of sets up our conclusion of tonight as well. And he also tells Keys that there's always room for him in his family. All right.
Yeah. The only thing I would say about this very short segment is that Keys is trying to get over this it sounds terrible coming from me, but yes, and it's on his Titantron when he does make his entrance, because I noticed it being on the screen when he came out, when he got his own entrance to the Andre, the AIGHT. So they're trying to get that over, and it's on his shirt as well, as you can see. It's the one thing I don't really love about his presentation. He just says it all the time, and it's not quite up there with some of the Jacob Fatu stuff to me.
You think it'll be the next Yeet?
No, I don't. That's my issue with it.
Aight. Yeah, no, I can't. Maybe it's just because we're saying.
Yeah, I can't do it properly.
Okay, all right. So up next, of course, we got Miz versus Danhausen here, and Danhausen shows up in his what is now known as the Hausen Mobile. We get a comical tale of the tape here with some exaggerated figures on Danhausen's side, and he of course shows up with Miz's Slammy as well. Kit Wilson is on the outside with the Miz, and he's offering some sort of distraction, allowing Miz to start his beatdown. Danhausen then does, in the middle of the match, his Undertaker-style sit-up, leading to a curse to both Miz and Kit Wilson on the apron, sending fireworks into them from the apron, leading to a schoolboy victory for Danhausen here. And afterwards, they do a bit of a cat-and-mouse thing, leading to Danhausen's escape. And I'm curious to know what you think, Neal, before I give my thoughts.
Okay, I mean, it was mercifully pretty brief. I'm not loving the in-ring stuff, or the fact that the way that Danhausen's finishing move is now sort of established in a wrestling match as his curse makes the pyro misfire.
Or it makes the referees, arm give out.
Yeah. So again, maybe I'm not the intended audience for this, and it is this helping of sports entertainment in a wrestling show that's 3 hours long. So it's only a few minutes long. It's some people are going to be very entertained by this. I think the fact that he's paired with Miz and Kit Wilson does no harm. It works rather well with these characters. I just wonder what longevity there is in it when they move on to who else on the roster you want to pair Danhausen up with. But Danhausen has been a bit of a sensation, on the merch front, on the kids front. He's doing really well. The in-ring stuff, I just don't think is necessary. I think it's maybe my bigger takeaway. I don't think he needs to wrestle, although he's competent.
In terms of longevity, I feel like they've already exceeded my expectations as far as like maybe cumulative airtime goes. Like I thought at some point that they were overexposing him, because I do feel like there's like a real shelf life to this sort of character, but I'm certainly proven wrong. I mean, just judging by how successful I think he is. Now we are also talking about 1 month, but they've been showing him every single week across both shows, every single month. They're putting him everywhere, and it's only made him hotter. And for me, again, I don't think this is necessarily for my sensibilities either, but I can certainly appreciate it. And I can certainly appreciate the amount of like, I think effort they're trying to put into translating this character and his cursing into a live match situation, which of course could be incredibly difficult. But through things like this, through things like, Miz and Kit Wilson's performance, things like the fireworks, I think these things are all working out really well, in my opinion. I thought he was in danger of overexposure, but I think they've been varied enough with these appearances to the point where he's only feeling fresher and feeling more exciting and probably selling more t-shirts every single week.
Oh, big time, yeah. I think they are saving the most interactions for SmackDown. It feels like the Merchhausen bits are done during the international breaks on Raw, so a lot of people won't even see those. Otherwise, it's just a very brief interaction backstage where he seems to have, if you want to call it a program, it's with Miz and by association Kid Wilson, and they're kind of perfect foils to this guy, because they're over the top characters and react really well to all this. So I mean, yeah, it works.
As far as like Supernatural goes, like they also have a bit of a safety net with Danhausen in that, like, even if something looks particularly shitty or if it doesn't really land, like that first opening segment, that first segment from Elimination Chamber or whatever you want to say, you could say it still kind of works, even when when it fails. I mean, it's kind of part of the comedy of the character. So they kind of have that, like Joey Janela Springborg type of protection about it, where even if something miserably fails, it's sort of part of the joke.
It's a really good point. It's not one I'd really thought of, but you're right, because it's sort of built into the character already. This sort of Batman smoke bomb escape thing is meant to fail. He's still standing there whenever the smoke clears and then he just runs away. So yeah, if there's a botch or mistake, they can just that's part of what Danhausen is.
So I think we only got Fatal Influence as far as like in-person call-ups goes, but we do have a number of announced call-ups here. And among those are Blake Monroe, who we saw a vignette for, comprising much of her NXT debut vignette footage, as well as her footage from her NXT run. So she, of course, was put into a casket this past week, so that seems to be her write-off, and she will be coming soon. No particular date of announcement. What do you think about this particular call-up?
It's not entirely surprising after this week. I just hope they have some better direction for her. I mean, it looks like a straight lift of the character, which is par for the course now for an NXT call-up. But I think she seemed somewhat diminished in NXT compared to her run in AEW. I don't think the character has worked tremendously well. I think some of those matches haven't been wonderful either. So we know that she's better than what she's maybe been given to do. So my hope is more on the creative side and who she gets paired up with. So yeah, I hope for more.
I would certainly say like her NXT run has I think to me been under slightly disappointing compared to like the heights that I think she was approaching in AEW as like a top level person. Certainly like was involved in my match of the year that year with the Hollywood ending. In NXT she certainly felt some level of regression, but again, like I could see this talent being a very different case on the main roster where, you never really know. Like, look at how great a Lash Legend has translated far beyond, I think, what she achieved in NXT. You just never really know. Perhaps, like, through her NXT run, they understand now what works for her, what doesn't work for her better. And I'm very curious to see what sort of chemistry she has with more established characters that you have on this roster, like, I don't know, like your Alexa Blisses and Charlotte Flairs and, et cetera, et cetera. So she also
Tiffany, would be an interesting sort of foil for this character.
Yeah, there are a lot of blondes now. I mean, there are always a lot of blondes in the company, but, she is, of course, somebody who probably could have used a bit more time in NXT to get to that next gear. But again, at this point, that almost feels like a luxury when you have, I think, so many more talents that need that airtime to develop. So on this scale, of course, she seems, more than TV ready. So we got Rhea Ripley up next. There's a future, interesting program here between, Blake Monroe and Rhea Ripley. So Rhea Ripley comes out. It's her time to prove that the women's champion is a fighting champion, and she calls out anybody in the back. And who comes out? Well, it's Fatal Influence, once again, led by JC Jane here. There is a ton of heat for Fatal Influence. I'm talking Dominic Mysterio, Don Callis level heat. And JC is able to stoke these flames really, really well. She again, it shows how TV ready she is, how capable she is in front of like large crowds like this, and being able to really at least command and toy with this energy in some ways. She looked really confident out there. So the heat just continues, and they are drowning these three when they're trying to speak. They completely quiet down as Rhea starts talking, but once JC and Fallon and Laney start speaking again, the boos come right back up. Rhea, if you're able to decipher any sort of message coming out of this, Rhea basically says she isn't afraid of the numbers disadvantage and tells Jane to take her shot. Jane responds, and again, the crowd drowns out her response, but this is enough to allow Nick Aldis to come out to make the match for right now between JC Jane and Rhea Ripley. As far as reactions go for somebody just debuting, I don't know if heels could expect and want a greater reaction than this.
Yeah. They couldn't possibly have expected this, and it fell into their lap, and JC did a brilliant job with it, stoking it up. This is my time, telling the crowd to shut up, looking at her watch, saying, I've got all the time in the world, I'll wait all night. She was excellent at, the crowd, for whatever reason, gave them an awful lot of shit, huge heat. And she just did a masterful job for a new call-up in front of an arena-sized crowd of stoking it. And I just thought, yeah, it's great.
This segment alone, not even talking about the match yet, I thought made this group feel like they are a dominant presence on the show. And again, JC's sort of comfort in this sort of reaction, probably said a whole lot about how capable she is for all this. So we get our match, JC Jane versus Rhea Ripley here. Wade, I thought, was doing a very good job here, of course, giving us some background on Fatal Influence on commentary. He through his NXT experience is very valuable in the booth for matches like this. Rhea delivers the Razor's Edge and running knee for a 2 count. The prison trap is escaped. Riptide is attempted, but Fatal Influence come in and attack to cause the DQ, which I think might not be so surprising. They hold Rhea in place for the rolling encore. This match, being, I would say, a very similar playbook, almost the exact same playbook as Liv versus Soul on Monday. Put the new debut against the champion, give them a relatively sort of 50-50 fight, leading to a DQ here. But hopefully the overall effect here is to show where the new wrestler stands in relation to the benchmark as far as, competitive level goes. How successful do you think that was achieved?
I think very successful. In fact, I was somewhat surprised, given that this is a heel stable, how much they gave to JC Jane without the help of the other members of Fatal Influence. They of course did, bits and pieces of heel stuff, but JC was shown to have an awful lot of strength on her own to counter a lot of moves that Rhea delivered. From the electric chair into a roll up, that sort of razor's edge type move into a boot. Some of the near falls that she got out of that you would not normally see. They built her up very strong. I think JC Jane has got to be a very, very happy woman tonight with how this whole debut went, from the heat, from the opening promo to the match itself. And the other two, they did their job very well too, even if it was just the facial expressions and some of the physicality.
The whole group got a really strong showcase here, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're the only 3-person faction in the women's division right now, right? Can you think of any others, since Damage Control?
No, not at the moment.
None other, right? So by default, they are arguably the most dominant, thread. I suppose if you're not counting, what is it, Lyra the Irresistible Forces. But they, off the bat, they feel like a serious threat to the entire division, which we will get maybe more confirmation of a little bit later. The Usos are in the back with Jacob. The Usos again tell Jacob that they're going to watch his back. Jacob says, "I don't need you. Get out of my way." And Jay tells Jimmy, "I told you so." So then we hear from Charlexa in the back. They are in the trainer's room getting checked out after their attack by Fatal Influence. And Rhea Ripley comes in here. And, well, we get a little bit of a reunion between Rhea and Charlotte. And the three of them now, these three veterans and stars, you could say, of this division, all have a common enemy now in Fatal Attraction. Charlotte says she's going to take care of JCJ next week, unlike Rhea tonight. So, again, you have the biggest stars on this roster on the women's side of things, all targeting Fatal Attraction and talking about them and looking at them and reeling from their attacks like they're a serious threat. So I'm loving this direction already. I'm loving this direction for Rhea and Charlotte and Alexa, and certainly Fatal Attraction coming out of all this.
Yeah, 'cause I think we're going to get another week of strength for Fatal Attraction out of this, and then perhaps these three have to team up. Through some elements of luck and some elements of just really good booking and really good performances, this is one of the better call-ups I can recall in recent years.
Agreed. Brock Lesnar, we get our Godsmack video. Your thoughts on this whole Brock Lesnar thing? Do you think he's actually retired?
I'm leaning towards thinking that he is, but I also think that the company would pull out some stops financially or whatever to have him do one more match at in Minnesota. So we'll see. But I did buy into it. Maybe I'm a complete mark way, but when he did the little X sign to Paul, to tell him that it was real, and Heyman can cry on demand. We know that, but he did look genuinely kind of upset at WrestleMania. So
why the need to tell Paul that it's real? Why the need to signal for the X?
That's a good question, but maybe this is genuinely something. Leaving this stuff in the ring was not meant to happen. I don't know.
I don't know either. We do not know, and we shall find out soon, I hope. Up next, we get our next announcement of NXT call-up, and it is Ricky Saints, who will be making his debut next Friday. So, of course, this along with Ethan Page over on Raw. This seems to, conclude their story, whatever they've been working on NXT. But who cares, because we have more exciting things to talk about, like Ricky Saints debuting and appearing on the same show that might open the door for Starks and Hobbs reunion. Of course, a Cody and Ricky Saints interaction and team. As Cody said, whoever wants this championship, whether you're from NXT, Raw, or SmackDown, and this would probably be a leading contender for somebody from NXT who would want to interact with Cody. Your thoughts on Ricky Saints getting his call up to WWE?
Yeah, I'm glad to see it. I think that Ricky Saints did not have to have much time in NXT, and the timing seems to be about right to bring him up.
Yeah. I'm certainly excited. Again, just looking at maybe what we might qualify as a ready NXT talent at this point, like a guy who you can argue was already ready prior to coming here. Certainly is interesting. So yeah, a lot of fresh blood, coming onto the show.
Yeah, and much needed, and I think there's a real shot in the arm to SmackDown, hopefully, and particularly the women's division, which had been so stagnant. I think that's another big plus for Fatal Influence and Blake Monroe coming in, that, this livens up the whole women's division on SmackDown, which had been looking a bit flat.
So our main event is Jacob Fatu versus Solo Sikoa. The MFTs are attacking Jacob on the outside, prompting the Usos to eventually come out. Jacob still is not very happy about this, so he tells the Usos to just stay up there. The MFTs continue to intervene, and at this point, Jacob Fatu basically takes on the entire faction by himself, 4-1. The Usos are listening to Jacob by not interfering, so we get a big solo splash here from Solo Sikoa. Jacob then delivers the Samoan drop. He delivers the Mighty Moonsault, and he gets the victory just completely, oh my goodness. Jacob was really over here. They made him look really powerful, basically beating the entire group by himself, but that was not enough. Afterwards, the MFT tried to take Jacob out with chairs. But even this, Jacob is able to nullify and beat the faction all by himself. The Usos at this point are just watching on the apron. They're like, oh, you got this handled. You really don't need us. So Jacob follows by splashing Tonga Loa onto the announce table. Jacob tells the Usos that he will see Roman on Raw. really putting a lot of power and a lot of steam behind Jacob Fatu here by having him, well, sacrificing almost the entire faction to Jacob Fatu, minus Tala Tonga, who they did announce was not here tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First, a quick side note on Tala. The fact that he wasn't there in the beginning was making me think of the releases, but then, of course, we got the note, from Solo that he'd been given the night off. Yes, clearly the direction here is to get Jacob up to the Roman kind of level, to kind of build him as a credible challenger for Roman Reigns at Backlash. And they certainly did that. They had him convincingly beat Solo Sikoa. And then even when the other MFTs were attacking, he was able to grab a chair off one of them and put pay to all of them, wrapping the chair around the necks of two of them and delivering the hip attack. And then, like you said, that left poor old Tongaloa, who took the final beat of this, and Usos didn't have to help at all. So yeah, clearly, yeah, it's all about building Jacob up to this threat. That's Roman worthy.
Yeah. Again, he felt to me like the main character of this particular show, and I thought he came across incredibly strong by the end of it. So we shall see what the follow-up is. I mean, I think I'm most curious to see whether or not we get a lot more sort of like clear direction for the bloodline being heels at this point. And certainly when you look at this closing scene, it really does feel like it's Jacob Fatu, the crowd's favorite, versus the Usos, who in this scenario at least are certainly not the crowd favorites, but the Usos with Roman, who will get cheered in this match. That'll be very interesting. But by the end, I think their intended effect is to lift Jacob Fatu up to a world title contender level, which I think they will be very successful at already.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say a pretty newsworthy show. I mean, a newsworthy date in the WWE, and we kind of have to discuss like the two sides of the coin here. A lot of people getting promotions up onto this main roster, maybe filling up spots. And that, of course, means a lot of spots have to be made. A lot of room has to be made via the roster. Now, this is no excusing like a company that is making record profits why they wouldn't allow at least contracts to ride out. But this is, again, maybe their philosophy. We're opening up a lot more space so that we could have more people from NXT come in. What do you think about tonight's SmackDown overall?
Overall, this was a very solid post Mania SmackDown. I like the call ups. I think that the Jacob was the main character of the show. I agree with you there, but the highlight for me was the call up of Fatal Influence and just how you could not have wished for that to go any better for all three of them. Because by association, Laney and Fallon do well too out of all of this, and they looked the part alongside JC Jane. So I think that was a big success, and it does feel like fresh directions post WrestleMania. My bigger worry isn't so much what the quality of the TV in the coming weeks. It's the PLEs after WrestleMania. I've not much of a chance to chat to you about that. It just sort of felt it was so commercialized, so little wrestling happening that when you get to the blow off of the TV programs, what are we going to have? I really hope that doesn't bleed from WrestleMania into the other PLEs where we get like a 6-minute match at the end of all of this. But we shall see.
Yeah. My sense is that like Mania might be a bit of an exception in that like there's just like so much more time made for things like entrances, maybe like maybe bigger commercial inventory if that might be a thing. I have to think Backlash might revert back to more of your standard PLE length, but we will find out in a very short amount of time. What do we got? Like 3 weeks for Backlash? 2 weeks. 1, 2. Yeah, 2 weeks from now. Wow. So that is happening very shortly, and they have to get a card together. Built probably by Monday. You would probably start to see much of the bones of this card. So that is our edition of SmackDown. I agree with you. I thought a lot of productivity in making the show feel fresher. SmackDown is a show that I think needs certainly a lot more rehabbing than Raw, and just the energy of Fatal Influence coming in enough is enough, to lift this entire women's division, certainly.
Yeah.
Jacob Fatu essentially becoming a new major character, I thought was a fantastic way to follow up with his Drew McIntyre win. And honestly, those are my big takeaways here. And that's it.
Yeah, I agree. You're right that we shouldn't forget the background of all of this is that but it's not news to people. The plight of the independent contractor who is perhaps given a 4 or 5 year contract, which is actually, when you break it all down, a rolling 90-day contract, because that's how much notice that they can give you whenever they want to release a talent.
So at this point, I just want to remind everybody, this is a free edition of the XL version of these particular shows, which include our news discussions off the top. Usually it's me and John who do it on Mondays and Wednesdays. On Fridays, it's me and Neal. And then we go to our SmackDown review, and then we follow things up with a cafe exclusive, typically post-wrestling forum feedback, where we get to hear from you guys about your thoughts on the show or any of the news topics that are out there. And we have a few pieces here tonight from forum.postwrestling.com. This is open to all of our Patreon patrons at postwrestlingcafe.com. And we start things off here with Mike, who says, "Good evening, guys. Did not watch SmackDown tonight, but regarding the releases, obviously we don't know everything and all the inner workings of these things and contracts expiring. But a lot of these releases, like Black, Zelina, and Kairi Sane, seem stupid because of the amount of TV time they've been getting. It suggests a lack of planning on TKO's part and panic at things like WrestleMania and ticket sales being such a disaster to them when they're getting some of the biggest gates of all time. It's the wrestlers getting the blame when for some or not all of these, it's not really their fault. And while successful publicly traded businesses have balance sheets and profit margins and shareholders to answer to, people like WBD Zaslav get richer despite failing at his job and his company badly struggling. It's unfortunately the little people who pay the price. I'm sure some of them will land in AEW or elsewhere, but that's not the point. It's not ruthless, it's heartless. Anyway, any explanation tonight for why a SmackDown wrestler in Jacob Fatu gets to fight for a Raw championship? And Pat McAfee appeared again tonight, didn't he? If so, such a shame. He did not, and no follow-up whatsoever. No follow-up on like even the Nick Aldis agreement that Pat McAfee signed. We can only assume that he signed something that says he can't come back if Orton loses.
I think it's a storyline that they rightly have just completely dropped at this point. Cody played some lip service to the higher powers, and we'll see if that ever amounts to anything. But maybe that was even just a write-off of like we're just not going to.
Well, it sounds like Pat McAfee himself and Jelly Roll probably wrote themselves off. So yeah. So that seems to be done. But Jacob Fatu challenging for a Raw championship.
I mean, we haven't had a draft now in, I think, at least 2 years at this point. So, I mean, we're all used to the talent just moving around. And perhaps when there's in head canon, perhaps, if you really, really want a title.
If you're related to the champion, if you're a first cousin, are they first? Are he and Roman first cousin? Or second?
He and the Usos are first cousins. I don't know whether he and Roman are.
If you share some level of DNA, they will do a blood test, to confirm. You have the right to cross over brands to challenge for the championship. It's a cool match, so people aren't really questioning it, but you are, of course, very right to question it. Lastly here, do you want to read this one, Neal?
Okay, yeah, it's Luke, and he says, Tiff and Giulia redeemed themselves from the cluster they had a few weeks ago. It feels weird. Well, I agree with that. It feels weird having rivals like Roman Cody as champions on 2 different shows. Would be like The Rock and Austin holding separate titles. Is Trick the first babyface to actively stop championship open challenges? I love that they aren't changing his character. I don't know. The open challenges was, that was obviously a Cena thing. And then we had Ilya doing it. Then we had Sammy. And then we had Mello. So I suppose, yes, he is the babyface character who's cut it off, but it kind of works for him. The cuts suck. I'm stunned at the Kairi and Aleister ones. Kairi didn't have a great 2025 in ring, but just had her best match in a very long time on Monday and is in an ongoing story. We touched on that at the start of the show, particularly the Kairi situation, which is puzzling. Question, I really enjoyed the book club episode you guys did on Paige's book a while back. I was not a fan of her first WWE or AEW run, but now I'm a fan of hers after reading her book and hearing everything she's overcome. Is there a wrestler you were not a fan of at first, but after reading the book or seeing an interview or whatever has made you a fan. Thanks. Thanks, Luke. I always find these questions hard to answer on the spot when I haven't pre-read the question. So I'll go back to John and my review of Hell in Boots, which was Paige's book. There's stuff left out of that book, notably the Alberto Del Rio stuff. But she is very open about some childhood traumas. Some of them I won't bother getting into in much detail, but it certainly gave me some fresh respect for what she's been through as a person and why she's made some of the choices perhaps in life that she's had in her love life and so on. Because some people say, well, why does she choose these awful men to be with? Well, sometimes that's a product of, things you've seen and things that have happened to you as a child. And so reading that book did give me some fresh appreciation for the person behind all of that. So I'll just steal Luke's answer and say Soraya.
Yeah, as far as like interviews making me a fan of somebody that I might not have necessarily been a fan of before, I would say almost every wrestler, like if given more of like a platform to really kind of like express who they are outside of like the fiction of pro wrestling, or maybe like a script written by somebody who really doesn't know that person at all, almost every single person I think could end up being more likable. That goes for every single human being. Judging somebody maybe just by either their work or their 240 character tweet is often probably no real representation of who they might actually be if you were to sit in a car with them for 2 hours and actually talk, right? So yeah, to answer your question, basically anybody you might listen to an interview with, you probably become a bit of a bigger fan of.
Did you ever have a dim view of the Bellas way? I know you're a fan of Nikki and Brie, and you enjoyed Total Divas, Total Bellas, and their podcast. So, before all of that, did you think these girls are?
I mean, I certainly wasn't a fan. I didn't have much to be a fan of. I didn't think the product was very good. I didn't think their segments were all that good. But like, the reality show I thought was a great storytelling device, and I watched it the way I watch pro wrestling, as a storytelling device, not necessarily as a documentary or anything. And beyond that, I thought they were very entertaining people on those shows, and they're very genuine people in their podcasts and really a lot of their other media. So like I was more, maybe you could say more of a fan and engaged with like everything that they were a part of after that. And that goes for a lot of people who, at this point in 2026, almost every single person has.
Particularly when you have the interactions, look, everyone knows Brian is a quite a character on his own. But I think with the Bella Brains things, that's one of the highlights whenever they do that, when Daniel or when Brian Danielson is with the other two.
That's right.
I just find that it's the chemistry there is fascinating.
Yes. All right. A bit of a longer show this week, but hope you guys enjoyed it. And thank you, Neal Flanagan. Book Club, thank you for the shout out here. What is up for Book Club for our Double and Espresso patrons this month?
We're reviewing a book called Rampage, which is about the WWE kind of or WWF as it was, kind of invasion of the UK from the very late 1980s when it turned up on the Sky Channel, which very few people had, to the early 90s when it just took off almost overnight, seemingly. And it's interesting because, I lived through this and remember it quite well. So yeah, John and I are going to be talking about this next Thursday.
Excellent. And that is available for our Double and Espresso patrons over at the Post Wrestling Cafe. You can join up for that tier, and you can also get daily news updates from Neal, Jack, and John talking to you about all the daily news stories in about a 10-minute podcast, just getting you caught up so that you can enjoy the rest of your message boards or whatever podcast you might listen to, or just as you're going about your day, you get caught up on everything. So that is available. We still have our 50% off for new members sale going on right now over at postwrestlingcafe.com. So for as little as $4, you can enjoy everything that we have on offer. For as little as $6, you can enjoy our double tier, which includes Book Club as well. And then we also, I just wanted to maybe give one more plug here. John Pollock and I did our latest edition of Rewind Away yesterday. It feels like it's forever ago because of how much has happened since. But we did talk about a show that you guys requested. you guys voted on, and that is WCW Spring Stampede 1994. A show that I was actually a bit surprised to find out on Cage Match is listed, according to its current rating, as the highest rated WCW pay-per-view of all time with an 8.44 rating. Have you seen the show at all before, Neal?
I haven't. I've listened to your podcast, but and I've been trying to find the time to watch the show because of that rating and of what you guys said about it. This does seem to be a fascinating slice of pre-Hogan WCW.
It's right before Hulk Hogan arrives, and they certainly maybe ended this era with a bang with another Ric Flair Ricky Steamboat match. It's also Cactus Jack and Max Payne taking on the Nasty Boys, and in my opinion, incredibly underrated hoss fight between Vader and the Boss, Big Boss Man, that I think everybody should go out of their way to see. So listen to that right now.
Who got did he get debossed on this show as well?
Yes, he did. Debossed.
He did
debossed. Yeah, so that is available right now. You can watch the full show, full event actually, on WCW's YouTube channel, and then come back and listen to us talk about it in the Post Wrestling Cafe. All right, that's it for us. Kate and Ray Williams will join you guys tomorrow on Collision Course in the Post Wrestling Cafe. Until then, we will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.